This is Christ Media Revival. I am your host, Robert White, for this edition of the show. And with me is a special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Ken Bell. I'm the pastor at Tribe Tallahassee in Tallahassee, Florida. We're a startup church plant. Been open for a little over 6 months now.
Ken, before we went live, you were talking about Acts and you were describing what it said. Go through that. So why were you reading Acts, and then how does that relate to what you were talking about?
Well, we came down here to start. We came down here. Maybe we can do that podcast at another time, is how we ended up here. But bottom line, we're establishing this church based on a small principle. We believe in worship, and I believe that there's going to be a harvest, a revival of souls, if you will, through worship. Mm-hmm. And what exactly does that mean, and why do I base that? One of the greatest things that I've ever read in the Bible is that in the entirety of the Bible, there was really only one church meeting in the New Testament. And that just gives me thrills right there, because I hate church meetings. Gotcha. There's always politics going on in the church, but here we try to go by Acts, and we only going to have this one church meeting. But in the church meeting, the disciples had gotten back together, and there was a difference between their beliefs. Peter and some others believed that salvation was not for the Gentiles; it was only for the Jews. And there was an argument going on because Paul and others were going and saving Gentiles, and as we know, the Holy Ghost was being poured out upon the Gentiles as well. So they got together to say, hey, we need to be in one mind about all this. What shall we do? And this is the end in Acts chapter 15. This is the finality of the decision. And James, the brother of Jesus, was actually the chairman of the board at this time. And this is what his response, after all of the discussion, after all the arguments went on, this was his bottom line in Acts chapter 15 and verses 13 through 18. It says, and after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, men and brethren, listen to me. Simeon declared that God at first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. James goes on and says, and to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written. And then the next verse, he quotes Amos, the prophet. And Amos says this, it says, after this, I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down, and will build again the ruins thereof, and will set it up. And as we know, the tabernacle of David was there on Zion after he went and the Philistines had given up the Ark of the Covenant, which was stolen during the battle, and Eli died, and they said, that the glory of God was gone. So as he brought the tabernacle, he built this tabernacle of David on Mount Zion, and he set it up there, and there was no veil in front of it. It was open so that all could worship God in the presence of God. There was the doors were open there where people could come in through the walls from the north, south, east, and west. In other words, everybody was invited in. Everybody was invited in to worship. He had worship music going on 24/7 and going on. And it was just a time where they worshiped. And what the disciples are saying is that tabernacle will be built again, and that worship will be reestablished where all people can come in and worship in the presence of God. And then what does he say was going to happen is next? And he says that the residue of men, and we are the residue of men, that all that are left can come there and seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doth all these things, know unto God, all are his works from the beginning of the world. In other words, we'll see the revival. All these people come in because of the reestablishment of open worship to God, where all can come in and nobody's discriminated against. And that's where we're at. We're setting our basic philosophy off worship. We're here to worship, and we do nothing without the presence of God. And I say that because I think you and I have talked a few times, and you're probably about as hard-headed as I am. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, the most difficult things for me was to change my own mind about something that I thought about. And it took the presence of God to change me. I don't believe I could talk you out of anything. And I still say the greatest miracle in all the Bible, and a lot of people say, is raising Lazarus from the dead. Mm-hmm. But Lazarus died again.
Mhm.
So I say the greatest miracle is when people's thinking, their minds are changing.